This week, I'm joined by the incredible RJD20 to talk about player character cameos, how to get them in your games using old player characters, and do it right to not overshadow your current PCs. Welcome to We Speak Common. Hello and welcome to another episode of the D&D podcast for everyone, because here we speak common. Very much getting it spot on this time because Sam keeps telling me off every time I say it wrong. Today, of course, this show, as ever, is brought to you in association with two wonderful partners. The Dice Dungeon, who are your one-stop shop for gorgeous D&D dice, as well as other D&D paraphernalia like books and spell cards and the like. You can have a look at their whole stock by heading to the description of this episode. There'll be a link there. You can either click it or copy and paste it depending on what platform you're on, and it should automatically apply 10% off your entire basket with the code We Speak Common. If it doesn't, tap that code in and you get 10% off everything you're buying. The other partner to the show is Describe. Describe is spelled DSCRYB, and if you hit a .com at the end of that, you can head to their website and have a look at some amazing, brilliantly crafted in-world flavor text that you can use in your homebrew games. Descriptive writing for locations, spells, creatures, and they're adding more every single week. There's over 1,500 scenes right now. You can get a look at a load of them for free, but if you want a full collection, there's a subscription base, and you can get 10% off that every single month with the code COMMON at checkout. Of course, there is a link in the description below for that too. The only other people I have to mention, because they have a direct line to me and they will tell me off if I don't, are the beautiful patrons who chat to me every day over in the Discord server. If you want to get access to that and other things that we put out, like game rules, classes, adventure notes, stuff like that, then head over to our Patreon, which you can find via all the social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We're everywhere. It's 2021. That's how it works. But with all that said and done, I am today joined by a brand new guest, and I'm very, very excited for this one because he's just told me he used to be an actual knight. Hello, RJ.
Hey, Ben. How are you doing today?
I'm really good. I've been meaning to reach out to more people and get more guests on the show again because it's been a bit of a weird, hectic few months. And everyone's bored of hearing Sam and Wesley and James, I'm sure. Don't tell them that. And then you messaged me and I was like, yes, absolutely. Please come and chat to me. So I'm really, really excited.
I'm looking forward to this discussion. I've been practicing my common, so I think I'm ready for what we're going to discuss today.
I mean, you sound pretty good now, but I mean, if any Elvish slips in, don't worry, I'll translate it in post. It's fine.
I've been known to slip into Abyssal during D&D games commonly.
Oh, okay.
So if I start chanting, just I've given you my true name. You'll know how to stop me.
Yeah, I will. I'll make sure not to put your true name out as well, just to be safe.
Thank you for that.
Before we jump into anything, do you want to tell the lovely people who you are and what you do on the internet?
Sure. So my name's RJ. I am a writer over at rjd20.com. where I primarily try to help out dungeon masters in running the best possible D&D game that they can, while creating compelling worlds. I base most of the advice that I write on my own D&D games in the style of the ancient Chris Perkins column, The Dungeon Master Experience.
Oh,
that really
yes.
did. Yep, that inspired me back in 2018 to start. And Chris Perkins himself really kicked everything off because my first article, I tweeted it out with maybe 5 followers, and somehow Chris Perkins saw it and retweeted it, got a whole bunch of traction, and really just spurred me to action. And ever since, I've been writing on RJD20, making a few YouTube videos, and I've tried to start publishing supplements too. Released my first one last year. And, I just want to connect with other content creators. And this is really my first foray into doing that. So I'm really excited to talk to you today, Ben.
Yeah, awesome stuff. I think that it's kind of like we're so linked up because what you do is basically what I try and do over here, but in the written format. And I'm just like, I'm not smart enough to write. I'll just say words and hope they make sense. That's kind of how I do it. But I love it. I am that Chris Perkins fact has made me smile because he is probably the first DM that I properly like fell in love with. If he retweeted the podcast, I think I'd probably cry.
We can make it happen. Let's
we
campaign for it.
We get everybody just tweet Chris Perkins, and all he has to do is retweet it, and then we'll stop bothering him.
Exactly.
Okay. So when we were chatting, I had a quick scroll through some of your articles to find one that I really wanted to talk about, and one that like really stood out to me is something that I do all the time in my games, but I think I've mentioned it a few times on the show, but I don't think I've ever really talked about it. So I didn't read it properly because I want to hear it from you. So bear that in mind. But we're going to talk about having player characters or former player characters cameo in the games you're running. And straight off the bat, I'm a big advocate for this and I love it. And I know that some people will think it's really cringy, but I think it is one of the best things you can do.
I completely agree with you. We play Dungeons and Dragons for quite a while, right? People don't usually just hop into the hobby, play a few sessions, and then leave it. A lot of us are decades-long players, if not probably going to be lifetime-long players. So I think one of the coolest things that you can do is especially if you play with the same core group of people or a variety of folks in a friend group, if you can showcase the impacts the player characters have made in the world in different campaigns, one-shots, adventures, and even have them show up and, highlight what they've done, who they are now, have stories of them emerge in your world organically. The looks on my players' faces are just so illuminating when I do this the right way. And I think that's something we can talk about. A lot of D&D, right, advice can be taken in the wrong way or the right way. And this especially needs to be used with great care, because old player characters, it's really easy for them to show up and outshine the current ones, right? See, I think when I think of cameos in fantasy works, I immediately go to two popular culture films. Okay. So I think let's see if this works out. So I think a good former player character cameo is Doctor Strange in Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah.
All right. He shows up 5 to 8 minutes. He shows that he's badass. He has an impact on the world. He's kind of mysterious, makes you ask questions. Ooh, how is he doing this? What is he doing? It makes sense that he's there, right? And he doesn't steal the spotlight. He's there more as an advocate, as an assistant to progress the story. Bad cameo. What should have been a cameo. Legolas in the Hobbit trilogy.
Yes.
That is textbook the incorrect way to showcase a former hero or player character. What should have been of, maybe just a passing mention, right? Of Legolas. Maybe we see the blonde hair, okay? Turned into this member of the party, pretty much, that overshines everybody, gets all these awesome action sequences, and really doesn't contribute to the story of the true characters. If you think about it, what does Legolas really do that contributes to that story, right? Anything?
No. I mean, when I think of Legolas in The Hobbit, all I think of him is defying gravity.
Leaping up those stone steps, man.
Yeah, that couldn't happen. It couldn't happen.
Yeah, so those immediately leap out to me as easy examples. But in D&D itself, I think there's a few different ways, 3 ways in particular, that you can go about showcasing the, effects or the physical manifestations of former player characters. And those are tales of their exploits, remnants of the past, and actual physical cameos of the player characters. So did you want to dive into each one of those and kind of discuss them, see if we've done it in our games at all? Or
Absolutely. And I'll be really interested to see where you where you sort of characterize my use of cameos, because when I do cameos, I'm much less linear about it. I'm like, okay, so I guess for background, I mean, I've talked about this loads, but all of my games take place in the same universe, right? So if, let's say, for example, right now I'm running Tomb of Annihilation. If I go and run Rime of the Frost Maiden, when that's done, in my version of Faerun, that happens in that series of events, right? So I'm not following the published order. I'm not following the year order of Faerun. It's the order that the games happen. So
excellent.
The characters in Tomb of Annihilation, and let's remember my players stay the same for every game with the addition and subtraction of maybe one every year or something, and that doesn't happen often. Not every year. Like, I think the group has changed only very recently for the first time in like 9 years. So there's that.
That's quite the streak.
Yeah, I constantly say I'm incredibly lucky to have the group that I've got. But the guys playing their characters in Tomb of Annihilation, that is happening after the events of Waterdeep Dragon Heist. So their characters in Waterdeep Dragon Heist, who all went on, like one of them became the apprentice to the Blackstaff, one of them took over from the Xanathar. Like they did big things.
Awesome.
They are very much still in Waterdeep, still doing those things from the point that we left them. And as time progresses in Tomb, time progresses in over in Waterdeep, because the whole world moves forward. So when they go back to see those characters, they will have changed slightly. So with all of that as a background, the first way I cameo players is through mentions. I think it's the best way to describe it. So for example, Phoebe's character in Waterdeep, Lilith, she became the master of operations for the Black Network. And in Tomb of Annihilation, the Zentarum and the Black Network can make regular appearances and can be as much of a moving factor as you want. And so when the players, and I use meta knowledge in what I think is a good way here, when the players go, oh, the Zentarum and the Black Network, we know about them as players, we know this, this, and this. Let's see what they're doing. Oh, but our characters don't know that, so we'll go in, non-meta-y. So then they non-meta roleplay, and the Zentarum or the Black Network members might reference the new Master of Operations in that way. They don't say, oh, that Lilith chick. They say, oh, yeah, but we've got to do it because the new Master of Operations, roll our eyes, what a tool. Like that kind of mention. So that's the first thing I do. Where would you put that?
I would definitely put that in the first topic I was going to discuss, tales of their exploits. So I think that's the most subtle way you can do it, and the most attentive players will notice it. They visit a tavern, and the bard at the stage is reciting a tale of, an ancient battle that occurred, decades ago. And their old characters are the heroes of that story. They're not directly mentioned by name, but especially if you have the same group as you have for 9 years, they'll remember the time that they, dropped a massive chunk of rock on the head of Yeenagu, decapitated the demon prince, and freed all the gnolls of this world from his sway, right? They're going to know, oh, my goodness, the bard's singing about us. Oh, that's so cool. Their characters, of course, they're not going to know that, but, maybe their characters will be spurred to interest. And the new players at the table will see the excitement on the other players' faces, right? And they'll realize, too, oh, my gosh, I'm playing in a world with a dungeon master who will not just wipe away all the actions I take. This means that in the next campaign, in the next adventure, my actions and the consequences of them are going to be impacting the world in some way. And maybe in that campaign, when I walk into a tavern, I'll hear a song about my former character being sung by some elven bard. So that's definitely, that makes me so excited when I'm talking about it, right? If I was a player, I'd love that. And my players are the same way. Like I think one of the most important things you can do as a dungeon master, and this is in tandem with the topic, but you really need to watch your players' faces, right? You need to know when they're engaged, what makes them happy, what makes them upset, what triggers them, for lack of a better word. Yeah. And you really want to play off that. And this showing cameos or, tales of their former player characters' exploits, it always makes them happy. I haven't had a time where they've been upset. And I know you can do it in the wrong way, right? As I said earlier, if you overshadow their current player characters, or when we talk about later, if the player character makes a cameo and it's not how that player would want their character to be portrayed, of course that can make them upset. So you really have to be confident when you enact this little strategy.
Definitely. And I think that so there's two things here. The first is talking about watching your players' faces. I live for Sam's reactions to what I do in D&D. So when I first met Sam, it was when I went to a local BBC station to talk about the podcast and talk about D&D in general, and he was there talking about D&D too, and he sort of said to me he's like, oh, so how long have you been playing D&D? And I was like, oh, 9 years. And he was like, oh, I've been playing for 1 year. And I was like, oh, cool, let's talk about D&D. Yeah. And we got chatting, and eventually, I think he started messaging me on Instagram and asking me things, and then it got to the point where I went, mate, do you just want to play in one of my games? And I remember it was Curse of Strahd. We did not Curse of Strahd. I did Strahd Must Die Tonight as a Halloween game, and I said to him, look, this is a test to see how you meld with the group, but also it's a fun Halloween event, so don't worry about it. And all my players who've been playing with me for at that point, what was 8 years, I put on the music, and this was online, but I delve into describing the thundercrack and all that, and they're like, yeah, okay, all right, Ben, can't get on with it. When do we get to play? And Sam's face was like a picture, and I will always remember that. So yes, 100%. Watch your players' faces and see what they like, and see when they're engaged and use that. And I think that kind of goes into without trying to go off topic too much, a conversation I was having with some players recently about how a good DM is a good DM to their players. You have to meld your style to your players as much as you want to get your style and get your enjoyment out of it too. You're a good DM to them because you do what they like. I know that James is my DM because he, as a DM and a player, appreciates and enjoys a lot of the same stuff that I do in D&D. He loves knowing the Forgotten Realms lore, so when a little bit of lore pops up in a game, he's like, oh, I know what that is, and he loves it, which is the same as me. So whereas a player who hates Forgotten Realms as DMs who hates Forgotten Realms as a setting and hates using established lore that I can know about and kind of metally have a smile about, isn't going to be as good as a DM for me. So there is that level too. But the other point I was going to make that you said was about how it's a bard that's singing of a campaign, of a tale that happened years ago in a different campaign. So there's two levels to it. You can have massive time jumps and have these, have it so that the players, the former players are, maybe they're dead, or maybe they've ascended to godhood and they're not on the mortal plane anymore, or whatever, whatever happens. Those tales are great ways, and those bard interactions and songs and storybooks and whatever, they're great ways of doing these cameos, because in no way can they ever overshadow the players, because they're not there anymore. They're gone. It's an old age. And I think
it all relies. Oh, sorry.
No, go on.
It all relies on the interpretation the players have of it. Those old player characters aren't affecting the current story. This is merely there for the enjoyment of the players. Of course, you can craft it to have an impact on the story. Maybe it's a little bit of foreshadowing. Maybe an old foe is going to make a reappearance. But as you said, it's not going to just overshine anybody.
Yeah. And then the other side of that is if, like me, you're running in a world where things are happening very linearly, and, one campaign picks up right where the other drops off. I mean, when we transitioned from Waterdeep into Tomb, James and I came together and did our little duo DM, 2 DMs at one table, and ran the Lord's Alliance meeting from the Tyranny of Dragons 2 books.
Oh yeah, Rise of Tiamat. Yep.
Yeah. So we did that, and we had their old players there, but I also said to the characters, come with your Tomb of Annihilation characters, because we're going to start as your Waterdeep characters and we're going to pick up mid-session and transfer into the new characters. So
Ben, that's amazing. I love that. That's
Honestly,
so great.
It was one of my proudest moments. And James and I we planned it like a year in advance, and then we had multiple like little meetings about how we were going to do it, and we worked out who was going to be what characters in the Lord's Alliance. Like I had Lyriel and Vaja and all of that, who happened to be in Waterdeep, and he had all the ones that came from elsewhere. And then we made the meeting. I think the actual meeting lasted about an hour and a half in game because there was lots of discussion, lots of role play, and I baked in little surprises for James too. Which, talking about cameos, we'll get there. Hang on, I don't want to go off the sidetrack too much. I'm getting excited. And so they came in as their Waterdeep characters, and when they talked about an issue, a problem that needed to be solved, which was Tomb of Annihilation and the Death Curse, and then new characters all volunteered and they all met each other and they went to one side, and then James took over as one of his characters in the Lord Alliance and set up Tyranny of Dragons, which we're going to run as well, and he's going to run that. So we basically launched 3 campaigns in one meeting from that all happen at they're all happening at the same time. So that was one of my DM highlights, I think. But like I baked in an Elminster cameo for James because I knew he loved Elminster, so I had him arrive, but I never said the name Elminster. He was referred to as his other titles the whole time, and so James was there like slyly smiling, talking about looking at your players' faces and like nodding his head, and everyone else was like, "Who is this old dude? Who is he?" And I'm like,
"That's awesome."
They're calling him the Sage of Shadowdale. That's what they're calling him. That's his name. So and that's one of those don't let it overshadow moments, but. Yeah, that was I don't know how we got here. What was I saying?
I'm thoroughly impressed. No, that's great. It's just using tales of their former exploits. That's how we got there.
Yeah.
It was a tangent, but I think it was well worth it. That's a great story. I don't know if you've told it on this podcast before, but I loved it.
Maybe. I know that James and I have done an episode before about how we manage running the same setting, and I think we will do an updated one eventually as well. And like we'll talk about it when I get him to talk about Descent, because he's running Descent for me, and that's like 2 sessions or 1 session away from finishing, so we'll probably do an updated version on it then. But yeah, I don't know if that specific story's ever come out, but that's that was a big moment for us.
Definitely. So we did talk about, the lore books, the bards singing, and so on and so forth. The next category, I would say, of, in the cameo space would be remnants of the past. And these aren't just songs about the characters. They're not the characters themselves. Mm-hmm. They're pieces of old adventures and campaigns that show up in the current one. So this can be anything from an old artifact that the player characters might have wielded before, something legendary. Think the Hand of Vecna, passing from campaign to campaign, or the Wand of Orcus. The Book of Vile Darkness is one that I use in my campaigns commonly. Every one of my campaigns has had one of the pages of the Book of Vile Darkness scattered in it, because in my world the book was torn apart and its pages were scattered across the verse.
Ooh, I like that.
So now they're in the hands of all these powerful individuals and in lost tombs and dungeons trapped away. And if you're a player character in one of my campaigns, you're likely going to find one of the pages. So in my current campaign, hasn't shown up yet, but my players who played with me before, they know it's coming at some point. So I think that's another great thing, just having multi-campaign artifacts or relics. Have you ever done anything like that in your campaign?
So yes and no. So I think another great example of that, for example, is for when I cannot speak today. I'm too excited. When in Critical Role Campaign 2, right, that they found out that Ford's sword was a vestige, and they're like, "Oh my god, it's a vestige!" Great example of that. Yep. For me, so in the Faerun campaign that I run, I don't think I have. I'm trying to think.
Okay.
There have been powerful magic items, but I don't think I've had like artifact level relics. In my homebrew, like in my own campaign setting, there is a stone called the Stone of Archon, which I promise I named before I found out about Joe Manganiello's character. That is linked to one of the specific players and their lore. They're an Azamar, and they're meant to look after it and protect it, and they forsook it and were fallen, and eventually it's got to the point where it's back in their hands and they have to protect it because people want it. But the stone itself is intrinsically connected to the creation myth. So if you ask anyone who knows about the myth of creating of the world of Ka, they'll know about the Stone of Archon. So I can foresee that coming up a lot when I decide to run, the second campaign set in Idria rather than Esteroth, and have little mentions of it here and there. Whether it would actually show up in person, depends what the players decide to do with it at the end of Esteroth, if we ever finish that campaign. But yeah, so that's kind of along that level, but it's underbaked right now.
Okay. Another avenue of doing this too that I've enacted before is having a villain from a previous campaign show up in the current, and they don't have to be villainous as they were previously. They could turn out to be a patron of the group, an ally. I'm guessing, I've read the adventure books, but I've never run any of them, so I don't know if this actually comes up in practice, but flamboyant characters like the Xanathar and Jarlaxle Banre, they appear in multiple adventures. I don't know, have you ever implemented this tactic too? Because I've found that the players thoroughly enjoy when they fought against this character, for, maybe 2 arcs in the last campaign, right? And then they return as the benefactor of the group, and it's a different side of them, and they have these old prejudices, but oh no, I can't use that against them because that was my old character. And it just makes for this dramatic scene that is influenced from all these memories of the past. And I don't know, that's just why I love running with the same group of players too. There's so much more potential for pulling on the past and creating these awesome moments.
Yeah, this is definitely something that you can do when your group has been running for a while, and it's and that's why I refer to it as like good meta knowledge, like it's good metagaming, because it's the type that gives them a smile as a player. In writing we'd call it dramatic irony, right? But in D&D it's meta. That meta isn't a bad word, it's just a thing, and there can be bad uses of meta and good uses on both the player and DM side, and I think this is a good use of it. But so for me, I painstakingly set up Manshoon in Dragon Heist because obviously Manshoon, if you don't know his lore, there are many clones of Manshoon, and there could be many. So if you put Manshoon down in a campaign and the characters brutally kill him, as they did mine, you can bring him back at any point, and it's a different clone of Manshoon, and he's a different person with a different personality, which is a lot of fun. But I went to the hassle of rewriting a lot of Manshoon and making him this kind of what's the word? You could understand where he was coming from and why he was doing certain things. And so his storyline, which again,
relatable.
That's it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna do an episode at some point talking about the plot line that I've built for Dungeon of the Mad Mage, because it linked into that. So I have basically, oh God, we go down so many tangents, but it's good fun, isn't it? Manshoon, I think so. That Manshoon lost his arm in a duel with Halaster Blackcloak, the Mad Mage. Yep. And if you read his lore, there is a Manshoon who went down and trained with Halaster, or at least went down and challenged him to a duel. So I wrote that he had gone down into Undermountain in hiding, met Halaster, and they became good friends and all this stuff. And then the reason for Halaster going mad, it was something that Manshoon was trying to sort of overcome for Halaster, and he decided that in order to free him, he would need to kill him. And so they had a duel, and he lost, and Halaster took his arm. So when the players got to him, because he's mad, take a trophy.
Of course.
When the players get to him, every single NPC has been like, Manshoon's evil, he's bad person, kill him, on sight, don't listen to him. Yeah. And I did that instinctively so that when they met him and they heard his story, they were like, oh, he's different. But of course, what actually happened was the players met him and went, oh, he has a staff of power and a cloak of the Magi, and he's an evil person, and everybody's told us to kill him, so let's kill him. It happens. So, I had a lot of plans for him to become the benefactor of the group that decided to go down into Undermountain, because his whole plan was, I want the dragons so that I can pay an adventuring party to go down into the deadliest dungeon in all of the Sword Coast and put my good friend to rest and free him. And I'll talk about how that works in another episode when I break it down. And then he would have been their group patron, basically. You know, and like Jarlaxle had a big impact on the party in that game, and he did a lot. I had to properly convince them as Jarlaxle not to kill him, because they had him trapped, but they let him go, and he will definitely come back. I have plans for him to come back.
Sounds like you portrayed Jarlaxle in the proper manner then. Very nice job.
They did strip him of every single magic item he owns.
Then not the hat.
Oh yeah, the hat. They put him, I think they let him keep his eye patch. I think that was it. They put him in a boat with him, in a rowboat. They rowed him to I think it's the Eye Catcher is his ship in Waterdeep. And he got on it, and as he got on it, he said goodbye, started ordering Bregandalf to start making sail and leave the port, and the last time they saw him was him just standing on the deck of his ship watching them sail away. And I was like, right, this man's coming back at some point.
That's a compelling scene, man. That's great.
So I'm definitely going to be doing that a lot. Sweet.
Yeah, it works. It totally works. So anybody listening to this, try it out, because this is compelling stuff, especially if you have the same group. And even if you don't, even if it's not the exact same, right? Even if there's just one member of the party that stays consistent and you have new people joining every time, they'll know and they'll be like, oh, this is Jarlaxle. Mm-hmm. We met with him in the last campaign and he interacted with our characters in this way. And the last time we saw him, he was peering at our old characters menacingly as we sailed off. So even if the new players didn't experience the moment, if just one of them did, they're likely going to recap it, and just buzz up that excitement in them too. So
yeah, and it's one of those things as well, especially when you're using like NPC cameos, if they are well known, you know, like if Dritz Do'Urden makes an appearance in your game, let people know who that is, or at least they've got an idea, unless they're completely brand new. And if they're brand new, I probably wouldn't do it. I'd wait until they were settled and it would actually have an impact.
Exactly.
You know, these gone.
Oh, I was saying, speaking of like NPC cameos, another way of doing that properly without tarnishing the reputation or actually having an old PC show up, and it's something I've done a few times, descendants of the player characters. Right? Because I mean, they're living in the world, right? They don't just remain static, go on adventures their entire lives, right? They have children, they have families, and those descendants, maybe they'll make an impact on the world. Recently I had I think, great grandchild of one of the old player characters show up in one of my games. He was cool. Prime Dortus the 7th, I believe. And my players had a field day with it because he was Prime Dortus the 1st, and he showed up, his child, long after him, and he was almost the spitting image of his old player character with a little bit of extra flair. They loved it. It's a fun thing to do.
It's also a really good way of introducing that player character lore into newer groups as well, because for example, I talked about how James and I are both very similar, and we love, like, we read the books and we know all the lore of Faerun, and so we share the setting. In Tomb of Annihilation, he is playing a dwarf called Braylar Battlehammer, who is the I think like 5th line descendant of Brunar Battlehammer. But he is I love it, he's basically playing a Battlehammer dwarf who is a Dritz fanboy. And like has scimitars and wants to fight like Dritz, but he's a dwarf.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. That's great.
So that's a lot of fun, and me and him, like, every session we're like chuckling away like but the other players who, you know, maybe haven't read about the Companions of the Hall, they are learning via roleplay who Brunar Battlehammer is, and thus who Dritz is. So if I ever wanted to use Dritz for some reason, boom, there you go. They've got a kind of idea of who this guy is because of one of the other PCs using that kind of linked backstory.
That's excellent.
It can be a bit cheesy, I'm not gonna lie. Like,
as long as you're having fun at the table, you know. I mean, if everybody's laughing.
We've given him the nickname of Braylar the Brayblade because he just runs around the map slicing people up with his scimitars now. So that's a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think if you've got people who enjoy the lore and they know it, definitely use it.
Definitely, yeah. I think it's well worthwhile, and that brings us. I think that would bring us into actual cameos. Now, I'm not sure if you've done this multiple times before. I have, and I'd say it's had varying levels of success.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the most important facet of it is remembering that the old player characters need to show up, one, in an organic way, and two, not overshadow the party. Because if you're just placing these old PCs in the campaign just to say, oh, look, that's my old character. I mean, I'm a fan of telling grand narratives at the table, and I think you are too. You enjoy telling compelling stories, and a lot of the story has to make sense. The old player characters can't just show up just so there's fanfare, right? Mm-hmm. It can't be a Legolas and the Hobbit. You want them to be more like Doctor Strange and Thor Ragnarok, where, okay, it would make complete sense for Doctor Strange to sense Loki and Thor returning, you know, for the first time since he's become the Sorcerer Supreme, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make sense for Legolas to join this band of dwarves and a hobbit on their trek to the Lonely Mountain, right?
Yeah.
It really doesn't.
Yeah.
So I think those are the two most important things, and they kind of roll into each other. It has to be organic, and they can't overshadow the current player characters.
Yeah, I agree. I have a couple of different times I've done this. I think 2 or 3 that we can go into, and I've got one that kind of worked but fizzled out. One that I think really worked.
Love that phrase.
Yeah, fizzled out, absolutely.
Yep.
One that really worked, and then I have. Do I have? Oh, I have one planned upcoming that I can't really talk about because I know that the players will hear this episode, but I can skirt around it. Before I tell you those, what I do want to do is say that there is one other way that you can cameo old characters in your current D&D games, and that is by using the old D&D dice sets that you bought specifically for those characters. And if you're going to do that, you might as well buy them from a really good, reputable source who have premium D&D dice, like Dice Dungeon. Yes, that's right, RJ. This is the ad segment. Welcome to it.
I tip my hat to you.
This wasn't my best one, I'll be honest. If you want to grab yourself some really nice D&D dice, and I mean really nice D&D dice, then Dice Dungeon is the place to go. Now, if you are one of the many UK viewers and you are sick of hearing about a really good product that you want to buy, but then find out that you have to pay a bunch of money on import tax because it's coming from America, then don't worry. Dice Dungeon, they're UK lads like you and me. So you will get your dice shipped directly from the UK. And if you're not in the UK and you don't care about import tax and you go and look at those dice and you think, do you know what? I'm going to do it. I want them. Don't worry. They ship worldwide too. I have a set, RJ, that I have not stopped talking about for probably about 2 months now.
Okay. Give me the description.
Imagine a galaxy.
My eyes are closed.
Blue, yellow, green, red, proper space-like galactic image.
Okay.
Imagine that image in 3D, and then imagine shrinking that down and holding it between your thumb and forefinger.
Oh,
that is... Oh, yeah, that is what it is like holding the D20 for the plain shard Shadowfell dice. And I can tell you now, guaranteed, they will roll high because they have not rolled low for me once, and I have nearly killed 3 players with them. So, 100% go to Dice Dungeon, use the link in the description below, and have a look at their dice. I cannot recommend enough the plain shard dice, because when I saw them, I thought, wow, they're really pretty. And then I realized they were resin and not one of the metal sets, and I thought, there's no way they're going to be as good looking as I think they are. And then I got them, and they exceeded my expectations. So go and have a look. And of course, remember, there's other stuff you can get on there, like books, actual 5e D&D books, and dice and stuff. They come in lovely tins that make nice sounds like this. Ooh. And you can get 10% off with the code We Speak Common on checkout. The other company that we should mention into the ad segment is Describe. Now, you mentioned to me that you really love writing, RJ.
I do.
So, are you a trepid creative writer then?
I'd call myself that.
And what do you do when you get writer's block?
I place a piece of paper in front of me, and I grab a pencil in my hand, and I just start writing on that piece of paper. I push away the keyboard, I push away my phone, everything else, and I just rely on that blank page of paper. Why?
Wow, because that is absolutely the opposite to what I do. I look at a blank piece of paper and I cry because I cannot break my writer's block. I can never break it when it sets in. What I do is I look at that paper, cry a little bit, make myself a cup of tea or coffee, and then I go to Describe, DCRYB.com. There you go. There's a link in the description below.
Nice job.
They have, thank you, I know. I'm getting better every day. Okay, I'm improving.
Yep, I heard the last one.
They have incredible creative writers who probably get creative block too, but they've got a team of them, so it doesn't matter, who spend their lives, every waking minute, writing beautiful box text for you and I to use in our D&D games. You can go and have a look. They've got creature spells and items, I believe, with environments coming soon, and there's like over 1,500 scenes, and it grows every week. It's probably like over 1,600 now, knowing how quickly they add scenes, but go and have a look. There's loads you can read for free. They will inspire you, if not be perfect to use in your homebrew games or even Faerun games or whatever setting you're running. And of course, if you want to get the full collection, you can get 10% off your monthly subscription fee by using the code COMMON at checkout. Okay, ad segment done. Let's talk about actual cameos.
Yeah, from your games.
Okay, you want to hear my examples first?
Yeah, I'll go into mine after. I want to hear yours.
Okay, so the first time I did this was in my quote unquote homebrew game, my home setting. I had finished running Curse of Strahd prior, which of course is set in Barovia and is not really on the material plane. It's in Ravenloft somewhere. And I had the kind of plot to this homebrew world is that the convergence, a thing that happens every 26 years, was happening, and so the planes were thinning and things were coming through. And so when the players decided they wanted to go to a local library and read all about like the history of the world and stuff, they bumped into Rudolf van Richten, who was searching for their heroes because Strahd had reawoken and come back. And so the quest was simply, all you have to do while you're moving around is find your old characters and tell them to go back to Barovia. That was it. And that was to set up like a Strahd Must Die Tonight style game that then didn't happen with those characters and stuff. But it got given, it added to their quest list, and then because of some other problems they had in that campaign, it kind of just didn't go anywhere. And they were like, oh yeah, we've got to do that thing. Oh yeah, we've got to find those people. And I was like, I don't want you to be thinking like, oh, we've got to go and find these people. And I think when we came back together, because we'd had like 3 years off and I had to rewrite a lot of things and stuff, and we just had to do a massive recap, I ended up saying, that questline doesn't exist. Pretend that didn't happen. We're not going to do that. Because it had gone from a fun, like, oh, we have to go and find our old characters, yay, to, we keep forgetting we've got to go and find these people. Ugh. And I was like, okay,
it fizzled out.
Yeah, that's a fizzle out. We don't want that. So that was my first experience, and I was like, okay, you need to learn from that. The most recent one, and the second one I was going to talk about, was in Sam's one-on-one game. So Sam said to me, I really want to play like a traditional D&D game, but we don't have time to put in another scheduled game of the group. Do you want it? And I said, do you want to do a one-on-one game? And he's like, yeah, cool. So we just kind of play it whenever. And it's set in Faerun, and it's really relaxed, and it's really, really fun. And he started off being a member of the Xanathars Guild in prison. So his first session was a breakout. And of course, what's just happened? in Waterdeep, well, the Xanath has been killed, and Cowrie has taken over, Joe's old character. And they're now called the Locksmiths. And I got Joe to send me like a basically a small book telling me what his 5-year plan for the guild was and what he would be doing with them before he left. So that when he comes back and I inevitably bring the Dragon Heist characters back together for one more hurrah, I can adequately say, here's what you did while you were away. Here's what Cowrie did while Joe was away. And it kind of works with player vision. So one of the things he said was, I want to get everyone who is a member of the Xanath's Guild back in and quietly dispose of the ones who are evil and keep the ones who can be reformed into thieves, basically.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So Sam's character got broken out, so he had a link in with the Locksmiths, in a way, not Cowrie, but with the Locksmiths Guild, which is the first type of cameo. And then, without me planning it, I said to him that his mission was to like outfit himself for a 26-day journey to go and visit a druid grove, but he was to do it his own way and to prove himself to the Emerald Enclave. And he went to Trollskull Alley, where the characters of that adventure have their bar, right?
Of course.
And he had I use a supplement that allows you to improve weapons, and the way you improve them is through the two crafters in Waterdeep are a dwarf and Goliath who work together. The dwarf is the smithy, and he does all the smelting and stuff, and the Goliath is a really gentle, quiet Goliath who carves intricate runes onto gemstones to give magical effects to weapons. And he had one of their knives, and he was going to go and sell it back to them so that he could have some money to buy some things. And while there, he had this collar on his neck from the prison that didn't allow him to cast magic. And he was like, can you break it off for me? And the dwarf said, yes, if you stop those kids from playing outside my store. The kids were the children. This is such a long-winded story. I'm so sorry. The kids were
it's awesome.
Urchins that you can use in Dragon Heist if you want to. They're like an optional thing. Who the previous group actually they adopted them, so they became their children. So he had to talk to them, and in doing so, there was a moment where the two boys came running out onto the street, and Nat, the girl, was on her balcony. Annoyed with them or shouting at them or something, and as I described him, his attention looking away from the boys who are sticking their tongues out to this girl on the balcony, he looks up to the balcony, and a woman comes out and puts her hand on her shoulder and says something, and they go inside, and the woman is Lilith. So he saw her from a distance, living her life and doing some things, but he didn't talk to her, and he didn't have any interaction with her. But it all happened organically because I wasn't planning for him to go to that street. Sam was like, I'm going to go there because the shop's there. And I was like, great, well, who's there? All of those people. Let's use them. So definitely. I think that one worked really well because it wasn't that kind of shoehorned, forced, okay, you're going to have to talk to your old characters.
Exactly.
I mean, the only other example I can think of really quick off the bat is when I've been a player. So Orlo is my player character in one of James's games, and he is in Waterdeep with that group, and he was an NPC while I was DMing. So the characters could go to him and ask him for stuff, and that was kind of it. But occasionally James would run me a game, and I would need a player to join me. So Wesley made up a drow artificer who also has a shop in Waterdeep. So occasionally their group would go to that shop, and he would end up talking as two characters in the same room, and that was always fun.
That is a difficult situation, I gotta say.
Yeah, I mean, Wesley is an incredible role player, and he handled it perfectly. And I think that was the definitely the better way of handling it than me role playing his old character.
Definitely,
that is something we should talk about. But first, I want to hear your experiences with doing direct cameos.
All right, so direct cameos in my campaigns. So the first was when the former player character of my first campaign, Dead Isles of Alterin, cameoed in my second campaign near the climax of this campaign. The characters of the current one were seeking out these scattered keys that accessed an ancient soul prison deep below the earth that was created by gnomes to store souls in that they would then wipe clean and insert into the husks of Warforged, because
Sick.
way back when that's how gnomes created the Warforged. They'd capture the souls of, dragons, halflings, devils, and then they'd completely like erase all the memories and fragments of that soul's being, and then put them into the husk of, wood and other materials.
That's really cool.
So the whole point of this campaign was to get into this prison and stop some great conflict from ensuing, and they were having issues finding this final key. And little did they know, the old player character that was level 20, he's a plane hopper at this point, had done a favor for one of the patrons of the party and recovered this key. So when they're searching for this final key that they need, looking through this vast dungeon that was overseen by this icy beholder who controlled a Warforged Colossus. That's one of my favorite encounters I think I've ever made. It was a beholder and a Warforged Colossus all in one. Great encounter.
Cool.
Very fun.
Cool.
But they're trying to find this key, and this character, his name is White Crow. He's an albino drow. My player characters, they were pretty edgy. We were edgy when we were, what was it, 17?
That's pretty cool though.
Yeah,
I like it.
17 or 18, something like that. He was an albino drow called White Crow.
I like the edginess. I can appreciate that.
It was good. He appeared with the final key and, had a brief conversation with his former, player, right? And the current character. And that was a great moment.
So
they
can
loved
I
seeing...
interrupt and ask,
how
did you go about role-playing that? Like, because for me, I think if I was gonna, let's say I sat Joe down in a new group and I role-played myself as Cowrie, I'd feel really weird about doing that.
I totally understand you. So we played in that campaign with White Crow for, I think, 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. And I, like we talked about earlier, always pay attention to the expressions on your players' faces. But I also make sure to pay attention to how they perceive their character in the world and how they portray them. And I take extensive notes. So when I knew that I wanted to showcase White Crow in the current world and that he's having a massive impact on the trouble of the day, I went back, I studied my old notes, I looked at, okay, this was his mannerism, and I thought back into my head and said, okay, he really saw himself as, this edgy character that would appear from an unexpected place and would have short one-liners and would only stay as long as he needed to stay. Mm-hmm. And, I had all this wrapped around in my head. So when the moment finally came, I was to the point with my words. I had a dramatic entrance for White Crow. He only stayed up until that second that he needed to. I tried to really stay true to how the player portrayed him. And I think that's key. Organic entrance, not overshadowing the current player characters, and staying true to the former player's vision for that character. Mm. So that's really what I did. I studied it a little bit. I spent some time reflecting because I knew this moment was incoming. They'd have hints to it beforehand. I knew I wanted this character to make an entrance. So it wasn't as, random or organic as your player traveling to Troll Skull Alley and seeing Lilith there. I had some time to prepare for it, but even if I hadn't, I think I would take a moment before I started speaking as that character, and I would think back to how the player portrayed them, because I think if you tarnish their vision of that character, you're failing. You don't want to skew people's perception. You don't want to, make a memory murky and destroy it, right? You want to enlighten them. You want to showcase, hey, this was someone you played for weeks or months or years. They're still here, and they're still how you remember them with some extra layers added on top.
Yeah, I think okay. You've pretty much nailed the advice there, I think, because that's made me feel very confident about maybe trying it in the future. Dude, oh God, yeah, that would be so cool. I think if I encountered, I have a character in Descent who has done a lot, much like James's character in Waterdeep, who went on to become the Blackstaff's apprentice and might one day become
Yep.
the Blackstaff, depending on
Ooh.
how long we wait until we see him again.
Mhm.
My character in Descent has gone on to become one of the Dukes of Baldur's Gate, and should they be successful, he's a champion of the Pit Fiend, who will no longer be a Pit Fiend, but the demigod who will be in charge of Avernus. So
Yeah.
like he's a big deal in his own thing now, in his own right. And when I finally stop playing as him, which I never want to do right now, I'm still very much I want to take him to 20 because he's at 13 now. I want to take him to 20. But if I were to leave him for a while and then have him appear in my game, I'd lose my mind, you know?
Yep. Yeah, that's the situation that happened there. That's what my players were just, oh my gosh, it's him. They knew it too. When I didn't go with just saying it's White Crow, I described the broken, pale skin of his face, the white, stark white hair, purple eyes, the speed in his step, and even though the characters at that point were, I think, 13th level, I described that the deftness, the dexterity of this formerly 20th level character, how even they, accomplished adventurers that were fighting beholders and warforged colossi, couldn't even track the movement of this man.
Yeah.
So just watching their faces unfold, oh, I loved it. It was good. It was an enjoyable experience, I must say. And that was only the first. I don't know. Do we have time to go into the other ones, or did you want to talk about elaborate on other things?
We can do one more because I'm enjoying this.
Okay. All right. I have to choose my favorite one. Okay. We'll choose a different one. On the other end of the spectrum, White Crow remained a hero. Calatoric, called the Frozen Kobold.
I can tell in the way you said his name that this is good.
He suffered an embarrassing death in my first campaign. He was crushed by a rolling boulder trap, destroyed, bludgeoned beyond recovery.
That's a bad way to go.
And he was a warlock of Levistus, the Archduke of Archdevil of Stygia. And his soul went, of course, to Stygia, went to Beator, then to Stygia, and he continued to pursue his dream of becoming an archdevil, powerful enough to rival, in my world, Tiamat, in most others, Asmodeus. In my current campaign, one of the player characters, the player who portrayed Calatoric all the way back in 2015, is a warlock. Was a warlock of the Frozen Kobold. And, oh yes, it's fantastic. And so I was able to portray the former player character who's now grown massively in power in the hundreds of years that have passed since that first campaign, and has not become an archdevil yet, but is powerful enough to bestow pact magic upon a warlock. And it's been lovely, and it ended violently. Because the current player character, he found a white dragon egg deep in a hatchery that was run by a group of kobold killers called the Headhunter Clan. And he found this white dragon egg, and he recovered it, nursed it, and it hatched. And Calatoric sees this white dragon as a weapon to be wielded. But the current player character, not so much. He saw the innocence of the white dragon, because in my world, not all dragons are inherently evil, right, from birth, right? You have a chance to nurture them, right? So Calatoric, not Calatoric, the current player character, he'd lost his family. He saw this white dragon wormling as a chance to have a family of his own, to have a child, to raise it, to be, a partner, a companion. But his patron Calatoric saw it as a potential weapon of mass destruction. And ultimately, it came to a head where Calatoric severed his connection to the current player character, so the player character lost their warlock abilities, and stole away the white dragon wormling named Avalanche. So now, Avalanche is lost to this potential archdevil. He's become a villain in the current campaign. He's a thorn in the player character's side, and he's, concurrently pursuing one of the same goals as the group. So what started as a poor kobold warlock who was crushed in this hallway and this death trap dungeon has become a potential major villain in a campaign
That's really
6
cool.
years down the road.
That's really
So that's
cool.
the cameo. It's ongoing. So yeah.
I can't believe that you were brave enough to take away the group's puppy, basically. That's
Oh my
a
gosh.
bold move, man.
After that first session, one of my players made a meme, and it's that meme where, I just met this dog or whatever. I've had it for 5 minutes, and I will die for them. I think it's from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, something like that. But players loved Avalanche, loved the portrayal of this little innocent wormling who was chomping away at any food that he could find, and freezing it solid and learning how to fly. Because really cool. I had the Draconomicon, which describes the first moments of a wormling.
Yes.
Oh, it was fantastic. They loved it, and I took him away.
You're an evil man.
It's a compelling plot point, and it worked. So yeah. So those are the 2 player character cameos that have showcased in my campaigns, and they've been wildly successful. The latter one obviously wasn't as excitable of a moment, but the dread in their eyes, the baggage attached to this kobold, they all knew it, and it's made the game better.
And that's the goal, isn't it? To make the game better.
Yep.
So yeah, well
of course.
done, man. I love it. I think then the only thing that's left to say is before we just do like a little roundup of the final tips and tricks is the other 2 types of smaller cameos that I think I use that we haven't really touched on. So, and your story is a perfect segue into the first one, which is former dead PCs or former PCs who are now dead. So this has only come up quite recently for me because I'm running Tomb of Annihilation and it's deadly. I mean, we've played 14 sessions and we've had 3 deaths. So yeah, it's
Grinder.
We are playing on Meat Grinder as well, but we had
nice.
1 death happened, and then we had a 3-week break before we could play again. So, we were all excited to come together. The player had a chance to like mourn their death and sort of come to terms with it and get into their new character. We're excited for the new character to come along. We started the session with a funeral, and we ended the session with another one.
Oh, that's rough. Same player?
No, it wasn't.
Thank the gods.
Oh my god, I don't know what I could have done to make that okay. Like I would have said, if you want to leave the table, it's fine. That would have been awful. No, it was another player, unfortunately. But yeah, so the thing that I want to be doing and things that I want to be thinking about in the future, it's pretty tricky if the characters aren't, if they're low level and they haven't done much yet. If a character dies and they've been with the party for a long time, they're 10th to 15th or whatever level, and they've done something decent, like something memorable, then having their name in stone somewhere, for literally, if you want to, like have a statue somewhere of them, that's a nice thing. Maybe one gets put up, you don't tell the players it's put up until they stumble, they go back there. They have a big fight in a certain city, their character dies, they mourn, they have a funeral, they leave, and then 70 sessions later they come back. Maybe you're in a different campaign, they go back to that city.
Excellent idea, Ben.
There's the statue. The one I did for a character, so our first character to die in Tomb of Annihilation died on a test excursion to the jungles. The characters said, we're gonna go out into the jungles, we're gonna see what it's like, and then we're gonna go back to Fort Balerion, and then we'll do our proper excursion. And when they got back to the fort, a letter had arrived for the character who had died. So the players obviously were like, oh, that's awkward, okay. And I saw the player go, no, a letter, like, oh, I've missed it, I'm dead. But it was a chance for because obviously the players open it and read it.
Yeah.
It was a chance it was something I was going to do for that player anyway, to spur them on in the campaign, in the storyline. So I just kept it in, and in a way it's helped spur the player on, because they're like, oh, I'm going to fix the death curse for my current reasons, but also because I know doing it will help my old reasons as well, even though I'm not playing that
Exactly.
character anymore. So, there's a couple of little cameos you can do there with deaths. And then the other really small one, for example, I have an NPC in Sam's one-on-one game who is becoming a very favoured NPC of Sam's, particularly because it's his one-on-one campaign, but other players guest for like 3 or 5 sessions at a time or for one story arc, and join him every now and then. And that NPC, who, I didn't plan for him to have. I planned for him to have an NPC at some point so that he had someone to help him if he went down for some sort of stupid reason. Like he got hit by something that was overly powered or something, and I needed a way to him not to just end the campaign there. But the NPC has turned into someone like another player character in their own right, in that kind of level, like a DMPC, but like someone who he would, like, if he was being played by another player, that's the kind of level of role play and appreciation he has for the NPC. So I can foresee in the future that NPC making cameos later in that campaign when he leaves the group and then appears down the line, but also in other campaigns if he survives. So you can do it with NPCs too. If the players have met an NPC you've created and they love, bring them back at some point.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. I've done that with an Afrisi named Magma4.
You have got some really good names, man. You're going to have to give me some tips and tricks.
Oh, Ben, why you say that? I came up with Magma4 on the spot. I was just thinking, a fire. Oh, he's in a magma field. Magma4. Oh, it was rough. But my players love the character and love the name too. So maybe I do something right.
I have definitely done the same, but usually it's like, oh yeah, his name is Greg. But then they love Greg. So there's Greg. He's there. He lives.
Yeah, whatever works, whatever makes our games better, Ben.
Okay, let's. We've talked for a while. Let's round this off and do quick fire tips for cameos. You can have maximum of 5. What have you got for me?
Okay, here we go. So, first and foremost, player character cameos are stellar ways to highlight that your world is living, breathing, and changing with all the actions that the players partake in. You can, have these player characters appear in stories of the past, a bard singing at a bar in an ancient home somewhere. You can have artifacts that they wielded ages ago show up in a current campaign, or even villains that you thought they dispatched reappear. You can have the actual characters themselves show up as well, but you need to make sure that they don't overshadow the other player characters, the current player characters, because the stories being told at the table at the moment, those characters are the ones that need to stay in the spotlight. If you have old player characters show up, make sure it's organic and make sure it doesn't take away from the current plot.
Do you know what? I think you've done my job for me there. The only thing I'm going to add is the thing that you said at the start of the episode. Watch your players' faces and use that expression, use that knowledge, and make informed choices based off of it.
Most definitely.
Fantastic. Well, look, this has been very, very fun. I've had a lot. It's been really enjoyable. I've had a lot of fun having this chat. So thank you very much for joining me. Before we say our goodbyes and do the old outro shtick, please remind everyone where you are on the internet, and if you would like to plug what you're doing currently, by all means, go for it.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Ben. So I'm RJ. I write articles every week on rjd20.com, and I also post videos on my YouTube channel of the same name. You can follow me on Twitter to hear my musings about D&D and other tabletop role-playing games at rjd20writes. And currently, I'm working on my second supplement, which will be titled Villain Backgrounds Volume 2. So I really enjoy villains. I really enjoy delving into them, portraying them, and helping others make compelling ones. So that's my next project. But I think you were right in what you said. I've had an excellent time talking to you, Ben. I hope in the future maybe we can do it again, because this has been phenomenal.
100%. Absolutely. I'd love to have you back on. And if you ever... I say this to everyone, but if you ever think of a topic, like when listeners come up with topics, I want to hear about them because I want to talk about them. And if you've been on the show before and you think, I want to talk about this on We Speak Common again, just hit me up and we'll sort it out. We'll make it happen. And of course, as ever, your payment for that plug is to let me play in one of your D&D games one time, so I will wait for that invite. Right, as ever, if you do want to get in touch with me or just the podcast in general, then we are everywhere. We Speak Common on Twitter, Instagram. We're on YouTube, which is just another way to listen if you find podcast platforms tedious and annoying. If not, every platform of your choice. If you want to support the show, as always, the best way to do it, the 100% best way, is to support us on Patreon. But if that's not your bag, if you don't want to do that, I understand. The next best thing you can do is just tweet about us, tell people about us, share people the episodes that you love, and build this community, because building the community is how I meet people like RJ, and it is what I live for. So do that. And if you do want to jump on the Patreon, there's a link below or on the Linktree /wespeakcommon.com, and it's on there. You can have a look. You get access to a private Discord server where we are chatting and talking all the time about D&D. We are giving each other hints and tips. We're giving each other homebrew items. We're building encounters, and now we have play-by-post and roleplay areas on the Discord server too. So if you want to get involved with that, that's your main draw to the Patreon, as well as, of course, my small bits of writings like Aramin's Tome of Foes, or most recently, the expanded Poisoned Condition. You can have a look at those if you feel like it. But I think that's it. I think we're done. So thank you again, RJ. And yes, we will get you back one day, I swear.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. It's been a great time.
See you later.
See ya.
Thanks for listening today. If you like the show, do us a favour, leave us a like and review on your platform of choice, and share us with your friends. Send us to your fellow DMs and players so that we can build our community even more. It really helps to get us out in front of more eyes. If you want to support the show, you can by joining our Patreon. Links can be found in the show description and the episode descriptions on all platforms. The music in the podcast is Street Dancing by Timecrawler 82. It's licensed under a Creative Commons license by NC. You can find it on the Free Music Archive.